If you're a designer who's good at your job but has no idea how to actually grow your career, this video will change that. Because here's the truth. Career growth doesn't happen by accident. Hey friend, I'm Femke, and for nearly a decade, I've worked with hundreds of designers navigating this exact challenge. And what I've learned is that strategic career growth comes down to three things in what I call the career growth triangle. At the base is your mindset, how you show up, your attitude, your goals, how you separate your worth from your work. In the middle, we've got your craft. This is practical design skills from UX to visual design. And at the top is your influence, how you use your mindset to craft and create impact on your team and in the business. Now, here's the thing. Most designers only focus on craft. They get really good at Figma, they understand UXR, they can build beautiful interfaces, but then they hit a ceiling. They wonder why they're not getting promoted, why they're not getting invited into strategic conversations, and why their work just isn't getting recognized. The answer? You need all three layers of this triangle. Today, I'm bringing you insights from two incredible design leaders. Kat Smalls, staff product designer who's worked with Asana, Etsy, and NASDAQ, and Anna Dawson, founder of Saint Scout Design, who went from advertising to UX to building her own studio. We're covering 5 critical insights together. Why your career path doesn't define your value, how to identify and pitch your strengths strategically, the mindset shift that opens doors, how to show up in strategic conversations with influence, and why quantitative impact matters more than you think. Before we continue with today's video, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Replit. What if I told you I built a fully functional web app without writing a single line of code from scratch and it debugged itself? So I needed to create a certificate generator for my product strategy for designers course. Students graduate, they get a custom certificate with their name, they can add stickers, preview it live, and download it as a PNG. Sounds like a weekend project, right? But I built it in a few hours using Replit. Here's how it works. Type in your name, drag and drop stickers wherever you want, see it in real time, and boom, you can download your certificate. But the cool part, I built this entirely inside Replit. No switching between tools and no deployment headaches. And when I hit bugs, Replit's AI agent literally diagnosed and fixed them automatically. It would catch errors, test solutions, and implement fixes while I kept designing. Less grinding on bugs and more time being creative. Here's why Replit is different from other AI coding tools. It builds production-ready apps, not just simple websites, but real applications that you can actually use. And they just launched connectors. So if you want to integrate with a service like Google Drive, Notion, Slack, Spotify, and start building, no API keys, no developer accounts, and no credential management. The agent is genuinely intelligent. It switches to more powerful models for complex problems and can even search the web for up-to-date information. And it's constantly improving your code in the background, learning from each fix, preventing regressions, so you're not stuck in debug hell. Honestly, this is the future. Agents that test and fix their own code while you get to focus on the creative stuff. If you want to vibe code your grind away and bring your ideas to life without the usual development headaches, try Replit. Link in the description. Now let's get back to the video. So before we dive in, let's take a breath. Maybe you feel like you're falling behind, comparing yourself to other designers, or worried that you've wasted time in the wrong role. Let's let Anna remind us why that thinking is the first thing we need to unlearn.
Your career path, it does not equal your value as a person, and your performance also does not equal your value as a person, and neither of those equal your entitlement to being happy. I think that work is a really, really important part of our lives, but it is just a part. And if you are in the weeds of figuring out whether you should make a change, or you realize that you are on the wrong path, I think you really can and should give yourself permission to still enjoy your life and feel good about yourself, even while things are not fully resolved. I know for me, there was definitely times in the past where I did not do this. And if I could go back, I would say, keep piecing things together in your career. But in the meantime, just give yourself permission to enjoy life and feel good about yourself. And I think over time, I really have just come to believe that your worth should not be measured by your job title or your performance or how figured out your career is. I know this might sound really obvious, but I just feel inclined to say this. So keep piecing together your puzzle, but don't put your happiness on hold. Definitely do not put your self-worth on hold while you do it.
Okay, we've given ourselves permission to separate our worth from our job title. Step 1, done. But here's what comes next. If your value isn't tied to your role, then what exactly are you bringing to the table? Now, this is where a lot of designers get stuck. You know you're good at your job, but when someone asks, what's your superpower, or why should we promote you, you kind of freeze up. You default to vague answers like, well, I'm a good collaborator, or I care about our users. Now, from my own experience, the breakthrough moment came when I started connecting what I do to why it matters for the business. Not in a corporate way, but in a way that helped stakeholders understand when I design this flow, conversion goes up, or when I advocate for accessibility, support tickets go down. When I built this system, the team's speed increases. And this clarity changed everything. Suddenly I wasn't just the designer, I was the person who could articulate design's value in a language that resonated with others in the organization. Kat breaks down exactly how to do this. She talks about balancing design craft, systems thinking, and business impact, and how to do it strategically to fill gaps in your skill set so you're not just working hard, but you're working smart. This is the foundation of stepping into senior level influence.
I think it's really important to know your strengths and to know how to pitch them internally at your company. So, for example, staff designers, like most other designers, are going to be responsible for several different buckets of work. So there's systems design. So if you're a product designer, this is very familiar to you. Product designers also need to be responsible for visual craft usually. And then they also have to make an impact on the business. So a lot of the times, the challenge with being a product designer is that you have to balance user needs and business needs. That's pretty true of user experience, traditional UX designers as well, but you're really going to have to make sure that you generally are moving numbers. I find that a lot of times there can be a challenge with that third bucket, the business bucket, and I definitely recommend investing in learning more about how you can be a more strategic designer, because that is really impactful when it comes to being able to say that you've actually influenced the business in some way. And obviously, Femke has a great course that talks a lot about that in particular. So one thing I would just mention is, if you find that you're not investing very much in strategy, that is something to be aware of. And then you'll be able to actually use your systems thinking and your visual design to have more of an impact on the business itself. So that's something that's really important. You have to be equally powerful, ideally, in all of these three areas, but obviously we all have, areas where we spike more than others. So you have to kind of shore up your gaps where you can with education.
All right, you've identified your strengths and you're building your skills strategically. But here's the thing. Knowing your strengths is only half the battle. The other half is how you position those strengths and how you show up when opportunities arise. I've watched talented designers talk themselves out of opportunities before they even apply. I've never worked in that industry, or I don't have the exact tool on my resume, or I'm not senior enough yet. And they get stuck. Meanwhile, other designers, sometimes those with even less experience, reframe what they bring. I haven't worked in fintech, but I've solved complex data visualization problems in healthcare, and here's how that skill will transfer to your company. That shift in mindset, that is what opens doors. Anna gets into this perfectly. She talks about the law of attraction, not in a woo-woo way, but in a really practical sense. Focus on what you can control, frame your experience strategically, and put yourself out there even when you don't check every box. She also addresses a question I get constantly. Should you be a generalist or a specialist? And her answer might surprise you because it's less about what's better and more about what aligns with who you are and where you want to go. And here's something I wish someone had told me earlier. This isn't a permanent choice. You might start as a generalist, specialize for a few years to build deep expertise, and then go broad again. Your career can and probably should evolve. The key is being intentional about which path serves your goals right now. Let's hear her perspective.
I am a big believer in law of attraction. Just put good energy out there and be like, yeah, I haven't worked in fintech or whatever it is, or e-commerce, but this is other experience that I have that I really think I could bring to the table. And, worst thing that happens is they're like, no, sorry. And then keep it moving. But I would it sounds kind of cliche, but focus on whatever factors you can really control and hone while you're waiting for the next role to come along. I think the best thing would be to ask yourself, like, first of all, do you want to be in a more of a generalist role? Do you want to bounce around a bit? Are you someone like me that likes change and that likes working on different kinds of problems? Then position yourself as such. But if you are like, oh, my first job was in like logistics UX for warehouse software, and you're like, that kind of worked for me and I want to lean into it, then like absolutely do that.
So you've got the mindset, you're framing your experience strategically, and you know whether you're leaning generalist or specialist. Great. But now comes the part that separates designers who grow from designers who plateau. Taking action to create influence. Because here's what I've learned. You can have all the right skills and the perfect mindset, but if you're waiting for someone to invite you into strategic conversations, you might be waiting a long time. The designers who level up fastest don't wait for permission. They find ways to add value proactively. And I'm not talking about being pushy or toe-stepping. I'm talking about smart collaborative moves that make you indispensable. Early in my career, I'd sit in meetings, hear vague strategy talk and think, okay, I'll wait till they tell me what they want me to design. But then I started asking clarifying questions. I'd volunteer to sketch concepts to help the team visualize what they were talking about, and suddenly I wasn't just receiving direction, I was shaping it. Kat has such practical advice on this. She explains exactly how to step into strategy conversations as a designer without overstepping, and how that proactive participation transforms how leadership sees your value. This is when you move from executing to leading.
I'm actually really interested in strategy, and I think that it would be really cool if I, as a designer, were more involved, because I find that when I have a better understanding of the strategy, I just do better work and I figure out how to prioritize my time. So then that primes the person for, to be prepared mentally to have you asking these questions. So I think explaining what your goals are is, important, but then asking questions is great. Something else I love to do is to volunteer to illustrate things that are written down. Because again, a lot of times PMs will just like write stuff, and I love that for them. But it's better or more tangible to see it expressed as a prototype. And that is the power that we have. And they can try to make their lovable stuff, but they quickly learn that it's really hard to actually do our jobs. So you can just volunteer and say, hey, like, I can put together a couple of slides, that can help out, can help express this document as something that is actually, an illustration of where we might want to go. And then by doing that, you can start asking questions like, is this what you meant? Is that what you meant? Is this, is this how you were thinking about it? And then you become part of the conversation, and they might realize, oh, actually, this thing that I thought might make sense for us to focus on actually doesn't make sense. So that's what we're trying to do, or like, that's how I view my role as a designer at this point, is I'm trying to help the PM build enough confidence to make the right business decisions and ultimately, ideally, make decisions that create a good experience for customers.
Okay, so you're showing up proactively, asking strategic questions, volunteering to visualize ideas. You're in the room now. But here's the final piece that too many designers missed: making your impact measurable. I know you might have cringed, like, Femke, I'm a designer, I'm not a data analyst. My work is about craft and empathy, not spreadsheets. Look, I get it. I used to feel similarly, but here's what changed my perspective. Numbers aren't about reducing your work to metrics. They're about translation. You're taking the value you already create and putting it into a language that executives, stakeholders, and decision makers actually understand. When you can say, my redesign increased conversion by 23%, or this fix reduced support tickets by 40%, you're not bragging. You're making your contributions visible and undeniable. You're showing that design isn't a nice to have, but it's a driver of business results. That's what gets you promoted. That's what gets you a seat at the table and what gets your team more resources and respect. Now, Kat breaks this down brilliantly. She explains the hierarchy of impact metrics, what stakeholders care about most, what's good enough, and why qualitative impact alone won't get you where you want to go. Now, if you want to move into a strategic role, make sure your work gets the recognition that it deserves. That's a non-negotiable. But let's hear her take.
So what they care about is quantitative impact. So the more that you can talk about quantitative, positive outcomes, that is also going to be something that makes you look better and worth promoting, frankly, because you are delivering direct business value. Like, this is where we have the real conversation about shareholder value. That is what companies like when the chart goes up and to the right. So you need to ideally be talking about numbers like conversion rate, revenue, metrics that the business wants to improve and increase. These are the most valuable things that you can talk about as outcomes. And you can put these in the conversations also when you're talking about projects that you'd like to work on. That is the way that you can also create more influence for yourself. So that's the first outcome is quantitative and positive. The next is quantitative and negative. So numbers the company wants to decrease, like time to completion, cost, customer support tickets. Those are like fine. They are generally better than qualitative impact, which is what I find a lot of designers tend to talk about. Like they talk about NPS, Net Promoter Score. They talk about like accessibility grading, not getting sued, which like, yes, is important. And I'm a huge accessibility stan. The challenge is that usually only works with a handful of people, and it doesn't help your director of product design explain why design is not a cost center, like why it is worth hiring more designers and building out the team, and like look at all the impact that design is having.
And let's bring this full circle. Your career path doesn't define your worth, but you get to define your career path. That starts with knowing your strengths, positioning them strategically, creating influence through collaboration, and making your impact impossible to ignore. These aren't just nice ideas, they're the building blocks of a resilient, strategic design career. Now, I'm giving you homework. Before the end of this week, document one project you've worked on using the framework that Kat shared. What was the quantitative impact? If you don't have the numbers yet, make a note to start tracking them going forward. Then post in the comment what you're going to measure. I'll be reading every single one, and I might even feature some of your approaches in a future video. And listen, what you just saw is only a few minutes from 60-minute deep dives I did with both Kat and Anna, where we went way deeper into career strategy, skill building, and navigating career pivots. If you want access to the full sessions, plus a chance to ask your own questions live in future conversations, join the Level Up Club, which is only open for registration a few times a year. Check it out in the link in the description. Before you go, drop a comment with your homework, hit the like button if this was valuable, subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.